Every person watching this has been taught a lie. The lie is that anger is ugly, immoral, and a failure of self-control. Since childhood, we internalize the lesson that to be accepted, to be loved, and to be, quote, good, we must perform emotional compliance. So, you swallowed it. You wore the mask of the good person, the one who never complains, always agrees, and absorbs the world's chaos without a word. But that performance is not an act of virtue. It is an act of psychological betrayal. This denial has left you feeling anxious, chronically resentful, and exhausted. If you feel like a victim of your life, it's not simply because of what others are doing. It's because you have deliberately disarmed your only reliable defense mechanism. You might believe you've solved the problem by suppressing that anger. You think, I'm mature. I'm above confrontation. I choose peace. But you haven't chosen peace. You've chosen psychological warfare against yourself. Think of the cost. That suppressed rage doesn't vanish. It mutates. It becomes the low-grade anxiety that buzzes beneath every calm moment. It becomes the resentment you feel toward the person you secretly believe is taking advantage of you. You've traded a momentary, honest conflict for a constant, debilitating internal conflict. And that silent battle is draining the life out of you. Carl Jung proved that energy does not disappear. It is only repressed. When you repress that vital, necessary energy, the energy of anger, it doesn't vanish. It simply drops into your shadow. It becomes an invisible, autonomous, and toxic complex that rules your life from the dark. This hidden anger is the root cause of your seemingly motiveless anxiety, your sudden, irrational blow-ups over minor things, and the passive-aggressive resentment that destroys intimacy. You are not at peace. You are at war with a fundamental and powerful part of yourself. But there is a fierce, protective power hidden in that rage, and the moment you stop hiding it, you will reclaim your boundaries, your clarity, and your psychological sovereignty. Everything changes when you allow your anger to speak the truth. You know that feeling when someone cuts you off in traffic, and instead of honking, you grip the steering wheel tighter and force a smile? Or when a friend cancels plans last minute for the third time, and you text back, "No worries," with a smiley face, even though your chest feels tight? We've all been there. We swallow it down, paste on a pleasant expression, and tell ourselves we're being mature, being the bigger person, keeping the peace. But here's what nobody tells you, that anger doesn't just disappear. It doesn't evaporate into thin air because you chose not to express it. Instead, it goes somewhere much more dangerous, into what Carl Jung called the shadow. And that hidden anger, it's quietly destroying your life in ways you probably don't even realize. Let me tell you about Sarah. Sarah is known as the nicest person in her office. She never complains, always volunteers to help, and when her boss piles extra work on her desk at 5 p.m. on a Friday, she smiles and says, "Of course, no problem." Her friends describe her as so sweet, never has a bad word to say about anyone. Her family relies on her because she never says no. She's the peacemaker, the reliable one, the person who absorbs everyone else's chaos without ever creating her own. From the outside, Sarah looks like she has it all together. But inside, Sarah's body is keeping score. She gets migraines that her doctor can't explain. She lies awake at 3 a.m. with her mind racing. She snaps at her partner over tiny things, a dish left in the sink, a wrong turn while driving, explosive reactions that seem to come out of nowhere. Sometimes she binges on food or scrolls social media for hours, feeling numb and disconnected. Sarah thinks there's something wrong with her. She thinks she's failing at being the good person she's supposed to be. But Carl Jung would tell her something radically different. Sarah isn't failing. She's caught in what Jungian psychology calls the trap of niceness and emotional denial. See, we're taught from childhood that anger is ugly. It's selfish. It's a failure of maturity. So we learn to swallow it, to wear what Jung called the persona, the mask we show the world. We become the one who never complains, always smiles, and absorbs the world's chaos without ever pushing back. We become experts at hiding our anger, even from ourselves. But here's the uncomfortable truth Jung understood. That mask isn't protecting anyone. It's slowly suffocating the person wearing it. Because anger doesn't disappear when you ignore it. It just goes underground. And this is where Jung's insight becomes truly fascinating. He asked a question that most of us never consider. Where does all that swallowed anger actually go? Jung called it the shadow, the parts of ourselves we reject, deny, and push into the darkness of our unconscious mind. And anger? That's one of the biggest residents of the shadow. Here's the thing that most people don't understand. That energy doesn't disappear. It can't. Energy doesn't work that way. When you push anger down, Jung showed us, it transforms. In his view, disowned emotions often form what he called autonomous complexes, powerful emotional patterns that can take over our reactions until they're integrated back into consciousness. And this is where things get really interesting. Because that hidden anger starts showing up in your life in disguised forms. It becomes anxiety. That constant low-level dread you feel, that's often anger that has nowhere to go. Your body is literally preparing for a fight that you never allow yourself to have. The anger gets trapped in your nervous system, creating a state of perpetual alertness. Your heart races, your muscles stay tense. You feel on edge for reasons you can't quite name. It becomes passive aggression. Ever found yourself forgetting to do something for someone who hurt you? Showing up late, giving one-word answers, making subtle digs disguised as jokes? That's the shadow at work. Your anger is leaking out sideways because you won't let it out directly. Sometimes it becomes depression. Freud described depression as hostility turned inward, and later clinicians noted this as one pathway into depressive states. When you can't express anger outward, you start directing it at yourself. That voice in your head that says you're not good enough, that you always mess everything up, that's often your own unexpressed anger coming back to attack you. And then there are those moments when it explodes at the wrong people. This is the really painful one. You hold it together all day at work, with friends, with the person who actually hurt you. Then you get home and snap at your partner for breathing too loudly. You yell at your kids over spilled milk. You rage at the slow driver in front of you. The anger finds a target, just not the right one. One person described it perfectly. I feel like I'm a ticking time bomb. Or why I feel chronically anxious and toward people who actually have nothing to do with what's really bothering me. That's the shadow speaking. That's hidden anger demanding to be seen. Sarah experienced all of this. She was the nicest person in the room, and she was falling apart. Her anxiety was through the roof. She'd find herself being cold to her partner in ways she couldn't quite explain, withholding affection, making cutting remarks that she'd immediately regret. And those explosive moments, they terrified her. They made her feel like she was losing control, like there was something fundamentally broken inside her. But here's where Jung's insight gets even more profound. The consequences of hiding anger go far beyond just feeling stressed or snapping at people. Hidden anger is why you feel anxious when you should feel calm. Think about it. When you can't allow yourself the honest power of saying, "No, that's not okay with me," your body has to stay in a state of constant defense. You become passive-aggressive because you can't be assertive. You hint and hope instead of stating clearly what you need. And your nervous system? It never gets to relax. It's always waiting for the next moment when you'll have to swallow your truth, smile through disrespect, or pretend you're fine when you're not. Without access to healthy anger, you lose the ability to use your own voice for psychological safety. You can't set boundaries. You can't protect your own well-being. You end up in situations and relationships that drain you, hurt you, disrespect you, and you stay there because speaking up would require accessing that anger you've been taught to fear. Here's the part that really hurts. Hidden anger doesn't just make you sick. It makes you powerless. You start feeling like life is happening to you, rather than being something you have agency over. You feel small, stuck, resentful, but you can't quite figure out why, because you've disconnected from the very emotion that's supposed to tell you when your boundaries are being violated. And the cruelest irony? You're doing all of this to be good, to be liked, to avoid conflict, but you end up losing yourself in the process. This was Sarah's turning point. She was sitting in her car after another draining day, gripping the steering wheel, when she had a moment of devastating clarity. She had spent so much energy being nice to everyone else that she had become mean to herself. She had betrayed herself 1,000 times in the name of keeping the peace. And that's when she stumbled across Jung's work. And everything changed. Because Jung didn't see anger as a weakness. He understood it as a vital energy. Modern Jungian therapists describe healthy anger as boundary information, your psyche's alarm system, telling you that something isn't right, that someone has crossed a line, that a situation is violating your needs, your values, or your dignity. When you cut yourself off from anger, you cut yourself off from this essential feedback system. It's like disconnecting the smoke alarm in your house because you don't like the noise. Sure, it's quieter, but you won't know when there's a fire until it's too late. The truth Jung understood is this. Reclaiming anger means seeing it not as a moral failing, but as sacred information about where you need protection, where your boundaries need reinforcing, where your life needs to change. Let that sink in for a moment. Your anger is telling you something important about what you need and deserve. What Jung called integrating the shadow, bringing disowned parts of yourself into consciousness, includes reclaiming the capacity for healthy boundaries and authentic self-expression. Not rage, not violence, not cruelty, but the ability to say clearly, firmly, without apology, "This doesn't work for me. This isn't acceptable. I need something different." This is what healthy anger looks like. It's not about attacking others. It's about protecting yourself. It's not about being mean. It's about being honest. When you realize you have the right to be angry, you realize you have a right to your psychological space. You don't have to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. You don't have to absorb disrespect to keep the peace. You can take up space. You can have needs. You can say no. And here's the beautiful part. When you give yourself permission to feel and express anger appropriately, something shifts. Integrating shadow material supports what Jung called individuation, becoming more fully yourself. You set clear boundaries, and your relationships actually improve because people know where they stand with you. You replace anxiety with clearer assertion. You stop being a people pleaser who secretly resents everyone, and you become a whole person who can be genuinely kind, because you're no longer kind at your own expense. Sarah started small. The next time her boss dumped work on her at 5 p.m., she took a breath and said, "I can't take this on today, but I can look at it first thing Monday morning." Her voice shook. Her heart pounded, but she said it. Her boss looked surprised, then nodded. "Okay, that works." That was it. No explosion, no conflict, just a boundary, clearly stated. And something inside Sarah began to thaw. She started noticing all the places where she had been betraying herself. The friend who always canceled, Sarah stopped making plans with her. The family member who made cutting remarks disguised as jokes, Sarah started calling it out, gently but firmly. "Hey, that actually hurts when you say things like that." Some people didn't like it. They were used to the old Sarah, the one who absorbed everything without complaint. And that was painful. But Sarah was discovering something profound. The relationships that mattered got stronger. Because now people were relating to the real her, not the mask. Her partner noticed the change immediately. "You seem lighter somehow," he said one evening. "Like you're actually here." He was right. She was finally present, because she wasn't using all her energy to suppress half of her emotional experience. She could be genuinely warm because she wasn't secretly resentful. She could be vulnerable because she wasn't constantly defending against her own feelings. And the anxiety? It started to lift. This was the part that surprised her most. She thought expressing anger would make her more stressed, but the opposite happened. When she gave anger its rightful place, when she used it as the boundary-setting tool it was meant to be, her nervous system could finally relax. She was no longer carrying that constant, invisible weight. She was no longer bracing for impacts she wouldn't allow herself to respond to. Jung called this process integration, bringing the shadow into the light. And the transformation is profound. When you stop hiding your anger, you don't become aggressive, you become honest. You stop fracturing yourself into the acceptable parts and the hidden parts. You stop performing niceness while seething underneath. You become integrated, all your emotions, all your needs, all your truth, living in the light. In Jung's framework, wholeness comes not from perfection, but from integrating all parts of yourself, including the capacity for healthy anger, for boundary setting, for self-protection. When these disowned parts are brought into consciousness, anxiety often decreases and genuine assertiveness emerges. Here's what Jung understood that our culture often doesn't. The goal isn't to be nice. The goal is to be whole. And you can't be whole while hiding fundamental parts of your emotional experience. Your anger isn't your enemy. It's not a moral failing or a sign of weakness. It's vital energy, sacred information, the voice of your boundaries crying out for respect. The person who never gets angry isn't enlightened. They're disconnected. They've sacrificed authenticity for acceptance.